I was perched on the edge of my glass desk, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown apartment, catching the shimmer of the silk blouse I had thrown on this morning. My phone buzzed insistently, breaking the calm rhythm I had cultivated over the past few years. I glanced at it, already dreading the name flashing on the screen. Clara. The text read, curt and casual. It was her, my sister, the same one who had once dropped my laptop into a pool as if the entire world could be destroyed with a careless flick of her wrist. That day had been the beginning of a long, painful unraveling, and somehow she had walked away unscathed, smiling, charming, and utterly fearless. I let the phone slide back onto the polished marble surface and leaned back, feeling the leather of my chair hug my spine. My life now, my real life, was a quiet fortress of achievement. The kind of life that didn't need approval, the kind that made others underestimate me until they regretted it. Yet, seeing her name there made something stir in my chest, a mixture of anger, nostalgia, and that small, stubborn ember of hurt that refused to die. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had tried to steal my identity years ago, but now I had a life she could only envy. I took a slow sip of my coffee, inhaling the rich aroma, and whispered to myself, let's see what she wants this time. I remember that summer as if it were a wound still tender. I was 22, fresh out of college, full of hope and ambition, clutching my laptop like a lifeline to the world I wanted to build. My sister, Emma, had been hovering around me, her presence always a mixture of charm and subtle menace. I trusted her. Too much, it turns out. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, the sunlight pooling in our backyard, warm and golden. I was balancing my laptop on the edge of the pool, answering emails for a small freelance client I had landed. Emma appeared, leaning casually against the fence, a mischievous grin on her face. "Oh, sorry," she said, with that sickeningly sweet tone I should have recognized as a warning. "I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." Time slowed. My chest tightened. My fingers shook as I reached out, but the laptop was already sinking, water swallowing every dream I had poured into it. It wasn't just a device, it was every late-night project, every pitch, every idea that had defined me. Then came the betrayal I hadn't anticipated. While I was in shock, she began subtly taking credit for my work. Using my contacts, mimicking my style, posting online under my name. At first, I couldn't believe it. Emma wouldn't do that, I whispered to myself, trying to convince my heart more than my mind. But she did. She did, and no one saw it but me. The sting of betrayal was unbearable, but I found a small lifeline in the form of a gift from Grandma, a delicate silver bracelet, engraved with the words, "Strength is built, not given." I clutched it that night as I cried alone in my tiny apartment, realizing that if I wanted to survive, I couldn't wait for anyone else to save me. By morning, I had made a decision. I would rebuild, piece by piece, without anyone's help. Emma could steal my identity, my work, even my past, but she would never touch my future. I tightened the bracelet around my wrist, a silent promise. I would rise, and when I did, no one, not even her, would ever underestimate me again. I started small, in the cramped corner of my apartment with nothing but a second-hand laptop, a notebook full of ideas, and the quiet determination that had settled in my chest like steel. Every day felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. I took freelance gigs, some small, some grueling, and I learned how to negotiate, pitch, and survive in a world that had always underestimated women like me. Then came Marcus, a mentor I met at a local networking event. He was older, patient, and somehow recognized the fire behind my carefully measured words. "You're underestimating yourself, Clara," he told me over coffee in a sunlit cafe. "And that's the only thing holding you back." His belief was like oxygen to me. I soaked it up, letting it fuel nights of writing proposals, making cold calls, and mastering skills that once felt out of reach. I remember the nights clearly. The hum of my laptop, the aroma of cheap coffee, the city lights flickering through my window. There were moments of crushing doubt, when I wondered if I had the strength to keep going. But I reminded myself of Grandma's bracelet, clasping it in my hand, when the panic rose. Slowly, victories began to appear. My first big client, a boutique marketing firm, signed me on for a full campaign. I celebrated quietly, knowing that Emma and the rest of my family assumed I was still struggling. My second milestone was a solo project that netted me enough to hire a small assistant and invest in better equipment. Each success was a brick in the wall I was building around my future, invisible to the world that had doubted me. I learned to be discreet, posting only vague updates on social media while secretly expanding my network and influence. My apartment, once cluttered with student debt reminders and empty coffee cups, became a sanctuary of ambition. Shelves lined with books, a vision board tucked into a corner, a modest sculpture from an art market that reminded me I could thrive quietly and elegantly. By the time I was 28, I had built a small but formidable business, with clients across the country and a reputation that demanded respect. No one knew it, not Emma, not my parents, not the relatives who once laughed at my dreams. The irony was delicious. I had become the woman I had promised myself I would be. Independent, successful, and untouchable in ways they could never comprehend. And yet, I carried a quiet awareness that this was only the beginning. Emma's shadow still lingered, a ghost from the past reminding me that some battles weren't over. I vowed that when the day came, I would confront her, not from weakness, but from the place I had built myself into, strong, unshakable, and entirely in control. The knock on my office door was polite, almost hesitant. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Emma's aura always had that insufferable mix of confidence and charm. She and my parents had arrived unexpectedly, under the pretense of checking in, but I knew better. They were expecting to see the same young woman who had been struggling for years, a woman still bound by their assumptions. I leaned back in my chair, letting my fingers brush across the polished mahogany surface. The sunlight through the window made the gold accents on my desk gleam softly, and the shelves behind me displayed the small victories I had accumulated: awards, client letters of recommendation, and a few personal mementos that marked my journey. My apartment, no, my office, was a quiet testimony to every late night, every hard decision, every sleepless hour. Emma entered first, her smile a little too practiced, her eyes flicking over the room with faint disbelief. "Wow, Clara, this is nice," she said, voice carefully neutral. I let the silence linger, letting the weight of the space do the talking. I could feel my parents shifting behind her, their smiles tight, unsure. This was my moment to show them the life they had dismissed, the woman they had underestimated. "Do you like it?" I finally asked, my tone calm, controlled, deliberate. "This is the result of years of work, independent work I've done without any hand-holding or interference." Emma's lips parted, and I saw the first flash of panic cross her features. My parents' expressions had softened into confusion and a tinge of shame, the kind that only comes when reality hits harder than memory. I rose from my chair, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, letting the city skyline frame me like a living backdrop. "The company you thought I was struggling with? That's mine," I said, letting the words sink in. "The clients you assumed I would never get? They're my proof. And that laptop, the one you dropped in the pool? It could have destroyed my work, my reputation, my confidence, but it didn't. I rebuilt it, better and stronger than ever." Emma's smile faltered. "Clara, Stop," I interrupted gently but firmly. "This isn't about blame anymore. This is about reality. The reality is that I've created a life, a career, and an identity that are fully mine, completely untouchable by anyone who thought they could take it from me." I gestured toward the framed contracts on the wall, the sleek presentation awards, the modest but elegant sculpture from an art show. "Every detail here is mine. Every decision, every struggle, every triumph. I'm not the person you thought I was." I let the silence stretch again, watching the disbelief and awe settle on their faces. Emma's hands tightened at her sides. My parents' eyes softened with an apology unspoken. The air felt electric, charged with the tension of what had been, and the undeniable power of what I had become. Then, in a quiet voice, I added, And now I choose how we move forward, if at all. Because for the first time, the balance has shifted. I am no longer the little sister, the underestimated one, or the victim of your mistakes. I am the woman who defines her own story. I sat back down behind my desk, letting my hands rest on the smooth surface, feeling the weight of authority in every breath. The room was silent, the kind of silence that hums with potential, with expectation. Emma's gaze darted between me and my parents, unsure, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. It was my turn now. I've been patient. I began, my voice calm but unwavering. I've let years pass while I built my life in secret. But now, if you want any part of it, if you want my help or involvement, you'll need to earn it. And not by trying to control me or relive the past. Emma swallowed hard. I could see the recognition of her mistakes flicker across her face, the hesitation of someone who had always assumed the world would bend to her whims. Clara. Stop, I said gently. I'm giving you conditions. Conditions that matter, not just to me but to you. First, honesty. No more lies, no more taking what isn't yours. If you want a role in my world, you'll need to own your actions and commit to integrity. I looked at my parents next. Second, respect my independence. My choices, my business, my life. Support me when I ask, but never assume you can dictate or interfere. They nodded slowly, the weight of my words settling in. And finally, I continued, you all need to grow. Pursue your own passions, not just what you think will impress others or compete with me. Toxic habits, old grudges, comparisons, they stay behind. If you're willing to do that, then we can rebuild a relationship founded on understanding, not expectation. Emma's eyes filled with tears, though I could see the spark of determination returning to them. My parents shifted, finally meeting my gaze with something approaching genuine humility. I let the silence linger, giving them space to absorb the reality. The old power dynamic had ended. I was no longer the younger sister who could be manipulated or underestimated. I care about you all, I said softly, my voice carrying both warmth and steel. I want you to grow. I want you to find your own strength. But my past doesn't need to repeat itself. And my future belongs to me. I will not compromise that. Emma finally nodded, small but sincere, and my parents mirrored her gesture. The tension in the room shifted from fear to recognition. They understood that this wasn't about punishment or revenge, it was about redefining the rules. The power was in my hands, yes, but so was the opportunity to guide them towards something better, if they chose to accept it. For the first time in years, I felt a calm satisfaction not just because of what I had achieved, but because of the conditions I had set. They were fair, clear, and unbreakable. The balance had shifted, and it wasn't a threat. It was liberation, for them, yes, but primarily for me. Weeks passed after that confrontation, and slowly, I began to notice subtle changes. Emma stopped trying to overstep boundaries, choosing instead to pursue her own career in graphic design. My parents, once rigid and overbearing, began asking genuine questions about my work, not to control, but to understand. They still had much to learn, but they were willing to try. I watched these changes with quiet pride, feeling a deep sense of closure that had been missing for years. It wasn't just about my success, it was about the strength I had cultivated, the resilience that had carried me from betrayal to triumph. Sitting in my office one morning, the sun spilling gold across the floor, I touched the silver bracelet Grandma had given me long ago. Strength is built, not given. The engraving read. I traced it with my finger, remembering that small, tender promise I had made to myself years ago. I realized then that the pain I had endured was not wasted. It had forged a woman who could navigate life's storms with grace, who could face betrayal and emerge unshaken, who could extend compassion without sacrificing self-respect. The relationships I now valued were those built on honesty, effort, and mutual respect, not entitlement or manipulation. I reflected on the irony of it all. The sister, who once tried to steal my identity, had unknowingly fueled my growth. Every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, Every tear shed over lost opportunities had shaped me into a woman who could stand tall, confident, and serene in the face of the past. I rose from my chair, looking out over the city skyline, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on my face. My life was mine, fully, unapologetically, and beautifully. I had faced the storm, reclaimed my story, and emerged stronger than anyone, including myself, had expected. And as I finally turned away from the window, clasping Grandma's bracelet around my wrist one last time, I whispered to myself with quiet certainty, I am no longer defined by what others take from me. I am defined by what I create, and that is unstoppable.